The driveway was freshly sealed. I noticed that first, the smell of it, sharp and chemical, drifting through my open car window before I even pulled to a stop along the curb. I sat there a moment with the engine idling. The house was prettier than the photos my daughter had texted me in August, back when they were still unpacking boxes. Pale gray siding, black window trim, a wreath on the front door, one of those expensive dried eucalyptus things from a boutique shop. I could tell even from a distance. She had good taste. She always did. I checked the dashboard clock. 20 minutes early. I'd left my apartment before 6 that morning to make the 4-hour drive, stopping once for gas and coffee outside of Columbus. I hadn't wanted to be late. After 31 years of standing in front of a classroom before the first bell, arriving early was something I'd never quite unlearned. The gift bag sat in the passenger seat. Inside was a small framed watercolor I'd found at a gallery near my neighborhood. Soft blues and greens, the kind of thing that works in a kitchen or a hallway. I'd wrapped it in tissue paper and tied it with a white ribbon. I'd also tucked in an envelope with a Visa gift card. Practical, because I knew they still needed things for the guest room. I grabbed both, smoothed the front of my jacket, and got out of the car. There was a narrow side path along the house, lined with fresh mulch that I thought might lead to the backyard. The invitation had said, "Backyard gathering," and I could hear voices from somewhere behind the fence. I followed the flagstones carefully in my good shoes. I heard them before I turned the corner. My son-in-law's voice first, the easy, carrying quality it always had when he had an audience. "She means well," he was saying. "She genuinely does. But my mom asked if she was coming and I said I didn't think so, and honestly, that's just a better day for everyone." Laughter, a small group nearby, the sound of ice and glasses. Then my daughter's voice. "It sounds terrible," she said, and she was laughing a little too. "But he's right. When she shows up to things, I spend the whole time managing her feelings. Today, I actually just want to be happy." Someone said something I couldn't make out. My daughter again. "I love her. I just need a break." I stood on the flagstone path with the gift bag in one hand and the envelope in the other, and I didn't move. A break from me. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of something grilling on the other side of the fence. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed at something. I stood there until my hand went numb from gripping the bag handle, and then I walked back to my car, sat down, and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. There is something I should tell you before I go any further. That house, the pale gray one with the eucalyptus wreath, would not exist the way it does if I hadn't walked into my financial advisor's office 14 months earlier and cashed out $38,000 from my retirement account. Took the full early withdrawal penalty, paid the taxes on top of it. I told my daughter it was money I'd been setting aside for years, an early inheritance, something I'd always meant her to have. She cried on the phone for 10 minutes and said she didn't know how she'd ever repay me. She didn't know it was my retirement. I never told her that part. I told myself I wasn't doing it to be thanked. I was doing it because she needed it, because the housing market had gone impossible, and they couldn't make the down payment otherwise, because she was my daughter, and that is what you do. You do what you can with what you have. But sitting outside her housewarming party in the front seat of my car, listening to her say she needed a break from me, I thought about the number 38,000. I thought about the penalty. I just sat with all of it for a long while without going anywhere. Eventually, I drove to a Panera 2 miles away and ordered soup I didn't eat. I called my neighbor Lillian from the parking lot. "The party," she said immediately, because she knew where I'd been. "How was it?" "I didn't go in," I said. A pause. "What happened?" I told her exactly what I'd heard. She didn't interrupt, didn't fill the space with sympathy sounds. Lillian has known me for 11 years. She understands that what I need first is for someone to just listen, not fix. When I finished, she said, Drive home. Come to my porch when you get here. I'll have wine. I did. We sat outside until nearly 9 o'clock. The leaves on the maple at the end of her street were just beginning to turn at the edges, the first faint orange of the season. Lillian spent 35 years as a social worker, and she has a particular gift. The ability to ask the question that reaches the center of a thing without any drama around it. Before today, she said, had you ever felt like your son-in-law was slowly shaping the way your daughter saw you? I sat with that. There had been things, small at first. A Christmas 2 years ago when my daughter started using a phrase I'd never heard from her before. Emotional enmeshment. Said so casually I almost let it go. The way invitations had gradually become shorter notice, as if my attendance were more afterthought than intention. A birthday dinner where my son-in-law spent much of the evening describing his own mother as present but not overbearing, glancing at me while he said it. Maybe, I said. Lillian looked at me, not maybe. I didn't sleep well that night. My daughter texted me that evening. She'd noticed my name on the guest list and assumed I hadn't made the drive. Hope everything's okay, Mom. We missed you. I read it 4 times trying to find something genuine in it, and then I put the phone face down on my nightstand. 3 weeks later, Lillian knocked on my door on a Wednesday afternoon, with her phone in her hand and her social worker face on. The careful one. Pre-loaded. Sit down, she said. What she'd found wasn't a secret. It was a public Instagram post from a woman I'd met exactly once, the wife of my son-in-law's college friend, posted as part of some thread about difficult in-laws. She'd screenshotted a text exchange with the caption, "The way some people just don't get it." The texts in the screenshot were from my son-in-law, sent 2 years earlier. My name wasn't in them, but the descriptions were specific enough. She inserts herself into every decision. She can't have a conversation without circling back to her own sacrifices. My wife is a completely different person when her mom isn't in the picture, calmer, more herself. We've been slowly creating some distance, but it's an ongoing process. Ongoing process. I read it twice, handed Lillian's phone back, and looked out the kitchen window for a moment. How long do you think he's been doing this? I asked. The post is 2 years old, she said. The texts look older than that. I thought about my daughter, saying, I just need a break. I thought about the Christmas phrase delivered so lightly, like something she'd read somewhere. I thought about every time over the past 3 years I'd second-guessed a phone call, wondered if I was reaching out too much, made myself smaller to avoid taking up space. He had built a story about me, and my daughter had been living inside it long enough that it felt like the truth. I didn't call her that day. I went for a walk instead. A long one, down to the community center near the park, a route I never usually took. I passed the bulletin board by the front entrance, paused at a flyer near the bottom. A 6-week oil painting workshop. Beginners welcome, all materials provided. Starting Monday. I pulled off the tab with the phone number and put it in my coat pocket. I'd never painted as an adult. In college, I'd taken a drawing elective and enjoyed it, but that was 40 years ago and felt like a different person's life. What I knew was that I needed something that was entirely mine. Not a gesture towards someone else, not an offering, something I would make and keep. The instructor's name was Thea, younger than me by maybe 15 years, with dried paint visible in the creases of her knuckles even at that first session. She was direct in a way I immediately appreciated. She didn't over-explain or encourage prematurely. She said, "Look at what is actually in front of you. Forget what you think it should look like. Paint what you see." The first 2 weeks I produced muddy, tentative things. A ceramic bowl, a glass of water. Thea would stop behind me, look at what I'd done, and say something specific and honest. Not unkind, but true. "You're painting the idea of the apple, not the apple. Look at where the red turns almost purple in the shadow. Try again." The third week, something changed. I stopped being careful. I followed the color instead of trying to control it, let the brush go where the light was actually going. When Thea came to stand behind me that evening, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, there it is. I stayed late to clean my brushes. On the way home, I stopped at an art supply store and bought my own paints. My daughter called in November. I let it go to voicemail the first time, listened to the message. Surface level, cheerful, and felt something cold and clear settle in my chest. I called her back the next day. We went through the easy questions first. My health, my apartment, whether I'd joined a book club. Then I said, I need to ask you something. A small hesitation. Okay. Before I came to your housewarming, I said, I walked around the side of the house. I heard you and your husband talking to your guests. I heard what you said about needing a break. Silence. I'm not calling to argue about it, I said. I'm calling because I need you to know I was there, and because I need to say something I've been sitting with for weeks. I took a breath. I cashed to give you that down payment. Every dollar of it. There was a tax penalty and an early withdrawal fee, and I paid both without mentioning it because I didn't want you to feel obligated. But I need you to understand that I have not spent 30 years being a burden to you. I have spent 30 years choosing you first, every single time. She didn't say anything for a long time. I didn't know that, she said finally. I know. Another silence. Then, quietly, he told me you had savings you weren't using, that it wouldn't really be a sacrifice for you. Her voice dropped. He said you'd mentioned it to him once. Something shifted in my chest. He told you that. He said, she stopped, Mom, We can talk about that another time, I said. Right now I needed you to hear me. I got off the phone and sat in my kitchen without moving for a long while. My attorney appointment was the following week. I had made it quietly without telling anyone but Lillian. I reviewed my will, my beneficiary designations, the transfer on death forms for my accounts. What I changed was specific and deliberate. I'll leave the details where they belong. What I will say is that when I walked out of that office, I drove to the art supply store and bought the largest canvas I'd ever worked on and spent the whole weekend painting. By January, I had 12 finished pieces. Thea asked if she could hang 2 of them in the community center for a local arts showcase. I said yes. At the opening, a woman I didn't know stopped in front of my kitchen window painting, the one of early morning light falling across my table, and stood there for a long time. She didn't know I was the artist. She turned to the person beside her and said, This makes me feel like I'm allowed to just be still. That was the moment I understood what I was doing. My daughter came to see me in February. Unannounced. She knocked on a Saturday morning, and when I opened the door, she looked like she hadn't been sleeping well. She was holding a small paper bag, my brand of coffee, from the place near her apartment she knew I loved. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped back. We sat at the kitchen table, and she told me things she hadn't said before. That her husband had been describing me for years as the source of her anxiety, the reason she felt uncertain, that he'd framed nearly every difficulty in their marriage as something I had caused or amplified, that she had believed him because he was calm about it, reasonable sounding, and she loved him. And it is genuinely hard to see clearly when you're inside something. I found messages, she said. He left his laptop open. She looked at her hands. He has been telling people things about you that aren't true. Some things I told him when I was upset, things I said in passing in frustration, and he made them into a case. I poured coffee into both cups. How long have you known? I asked. A few weeks. She looked up. I didn't know how to come to you. But you came. She nodded. I did not reach across the table and tell her everything was fine. It wasn't fine yet. But I looked at my daughter in my kitchen in the February light, and I saw something I had been afraid I might not see again. Her, not the version I'd been carefully managing around. Just her. I'm not going to go back to the way things were, I said. Not because I want to punish you. I don't. But I spent a long time making myself smaller to make things easier, and I'm done doing that. I want to be in your life. But I need to be in it as a person, not as a background. She was quiet. I know, she said finally. I understand that. And I need you to figure out what you want to do about your marriage, I said carefully. Not for me, for yourself. She nodded, and her eyes were wet, and she didn't try to fill the silence. We stayed like that for a while. The heat kicked on in the other room. Outside, someone was shoveling a sidewalk, the slow scrape of metal on concrete. Eventually, I asked if she wanted to see the paintings. She said yes. I walked her through the apartment. She stopped at each piece longer than people usually do. When she got to the kitchen window painting, she put her hand flat against the wall beside it and just stood there. I feel like I don't know this part of you, she said. You're seeing it now, I said. She called the following week, and the week after that. The calls were different, less managed, less performance. She was in therapy. She was having conversations I would not hear the details of, which was right. I didn't need the details. In March, I was asked to lead a 6-week painting workshop at the community center myself. Thea was taking a sabbatical and had recommended me. The class filled in 4 days. 8 students, a 23-year-old nursing student, a recently retired postal worker named Herbert, who told me on the first night that his wife had given him a set of watercolors for Christmas 15 years ago, and he'd never opened them. Open them now, I told him. He did. By the last session, he had 3 finished pieces and a Tuesday morning habit he said he planned to keep. He brought me a slice of pound cake to say thank you. I ate it standing in the parking lot after class, in the last pale light of the afternoon, and thought about all the things I had kept sealed for years. All the Tuesdays I had given away to other people's needs without ever claiming one for myself. That spring, I started a small website. Nothing elaborate, just photographs of my work, a contact form, and a short bio. I'm a retired teacher and first-generation painter. I paint light. Specifically, the way it falls on ordinary things and makes them briefly extraordinary. 3 commissions came in the first month. A small gallery in Indianapolis reached out about a group show. Lillian came over the evening I told her. She brought champagne and made me open it immediately. Right there in the kitchen, the pop of the cork, embarrassingly loud in the quiet apartment. To the woman who showed up, she said, raising her glass. I thought about all the ways to take that. Showing up to the housewarming, walking down that side path and hearing the thing I needed to hear, even though it broke something I hadn't known was fragile. But also showing up to the community center on a gray Monday in October when I had no particular reason to. Showing up to my own life, finally, without asking anyone's permission first. To showing up, I said. My daughter is expecting a baby now. She told me on a Sunday call in April, her voice careful in the way it sometimes still is, uncertain how I'll receive things. I told her I was happy. I meant it. I want you involved, she said. If you want to be, I'm not going to assume. I want to be there, I said. But tell me what that looks like for you. Don't tell me what you think it should look like. Tell me what you actually want. We talked for an hour, a real hour, not a managed one. Near the end, she asked if I had forgiven her for what she said that day at the housewarming. I thought about it honestly before I answered. I don't know if forgiveness is exactly the right word, I said. I think I understand it better than I did. And I think we're building something different now, something more honest between us. That matters more to me than the other thing. She said she was glad I'd been willing to let her back in. Me too, I told her, me too. My kitchen faces east. In the morning, before the neighbor's oak catches the angle, there's a window of maybe 20 minutes when everything in the room goes gold. The rim of the coffee cup, the cabinet handles, my hands wrapped around the mug. I paint that light whenever I can. Not to hold on to it. I've learned by now that painting is not about holding on. It's about looking. Actually looking at the thing in front of you, not the idea you've carried of it, not the version you wish were there. Just what is actually there. Some mornings what I see is a 63-year-old woman sitting at her own table, in her own light, working on something no one asked for. Something that belongs entirely and uncomplainingly to her. I think about the parking lot outside my daughter's housewarming. I think about sitting in my car with the gift bag on my lap, listening to a party through a wooden fence. I don't feel the way I felt that day. I don't feel invisible. But I am grateful I heard it. Because you cannot find a new direction until you are honest about where you have been going.